Hello there and a warm welcome to People's Imbizo, brought to you by African News Network. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Audrey Chimwanda and I am your host. Today we're coming to you from Middelburg. We're talking about the issue of air pollution that comes from the mines, how it affects the mine workers, and also very important, the environment and what recourse the people that are affected can actually take going forward. What effect it has on the economy of the country when we have so many mine workers that end up getting so sick from these toxins. Of course, I have a panel with me to join us with this conversation. You're at home. Also welcome to join in the conversation. You can engage with our social media platforms, our Twitter handle at ANN7TV. You can use the hashtag People's Imbizo. Let me take this opportunity to introduce to you my panel, and I'll allow them to do that for you so they can explain to you exactly who they are and what they specialize in. I'll start with you, Doctor.
Hello, my name is Mohammed Tayyib. I'm a medical practitioner in Middelburg.
Yes, Doctor, thank you. And?
Hello, everyone. My name is Anton Dota. I'm a chairperson of HN, High Field Environmental Justice Network.
Yes, sir. And?
Hi, my name is Thomas Mngoni. I work for an NGO called Groundwork. Groundwork is an environmental justice NGO. We focus on environmental justice and human rights, with a clear focus on coal, climate and energy, waste, environmental health, community media.
Perfect. And very important, we have members from the community here. They'll be joining in the conversation. In a few minutes, we'll be crossing to them so we can hear how this has impacted their lives, how air pollution has actually affected their environment as well. And of course, once again, you're at home. Welcome to join in the conversation. I'll start with you, Thomas. Can you talk to us about what you understand from what air pollution does to an environment, particularly from the mine, especially this particular town that is a mining town? What effect it has on the environment?
I think firstly we need to be clear about the level of destruction that comes from mining, but also maybe our development policy. I think as a country we rely a lot on extracting the minerals, because we believe that if we mine more minerals, then we will generate jobs and grow our economy. But when we were doing that, we didn't take into consideration the destruction that comes with mining. Firstly, we lose our natural resources. We lose our land. Mining contaminates our water. But it also creates air pollution because of the dust and the vehicles that moves in the mines. And in most common cases, you find that there are communities living very close to the mines. So the level of exposure to all the toxic dust, all that coal dust, always reaches such communities in a very fast manner, therefore impacting on their health. So I think around Middelburg, Witbank, the Highveld, it has become such a common thing that you find people with sinuses, people with asthma, and we've grown to kind of naturalize such sicknesses that it's common. We don't even question the root cause as to why people have asthma, why people are suffering from lung cancer, because we think it's just a genetic problem.
Because if our environment is not healthy, then as human beings, we can't be healthy either. Of course, we'll get the doctor to tell us more about that. I'll come to you, Anton. The Air Quality Control Act came into law in 2010, but we still have places like Middelburg, your Highveld polluted areas. Nothing has changed. Air pollution is still very high. Why has this law failed to be implemented? Or, the authorities, why have they failed to implement it? Why do we still see a lot of air pollution in our environment?
Yeah, the problem is that because even currently there was promise you haven't done in 2012 that they promised you're going to try to reduce that kind of activities and try to minimize the consumption of dust in those things, the mines, so on. But until now, nothing has changed. So I don't know what is the problem that it takes so long, which means they don't care about the community, don't care about the people who live in this country. What they care probably is just earning some money and do things what they want to do. But if there was some people, these mines being open in the suburb areas, maybe they think will change. But now because many areas that they're doing this mining operation is just areas who live in the poor people. that the country was supposed to look for them, that the country was supposed to be interested to try to developing so many things. If when we go to our clinics, we go to so poor clinics, but the main people who are being affected is the poor people. But when we look at the operation of mines, all the time they do it, and the areas that the people, they can't get something to say. When they come there, they promise them the jobs and all things, but nothing happened. Instead, the people get more jobs. The people now become unemployed. But just like the area where I live, there's some mines around some people closer, more or less 50 to 20 Ks around the people. But what's happened? When we go to clinics, even the public hospitals, there's no change. So I don't know what our government now we want us to do until they understand that these things now is too much.
Yeah, and it brings us now to the human impact that air pollution has on the people. Never mind the environment. Of course, the environment is very important as well. It brings me to you, Dr. Mohammed. Research is saying 20,000 people are dying each year from diseases that are associated with air pollution. What is your understanding of what is presented by someone who's been exposed to such toxins?
It's a very good question. I mean, it's not just a simple answer to that. Pollution, if you take, has different avenues that impact. One is the air pollution that I think that we're discussing today. But there's pollution of water, ground pollution. In terms of the human impact, what we see in our area is that we have probably the highest rates of asthma and childhood respiratory tract infections in the Highveld area. There have been a number of studies that have been done that one can allude to. The one study that was done by Groundworks in 2009 or 10, I think it was. It authored by a lady, Liz McDade. And there's some interesting statistics in what they found in terms of the increased number of respiratory illnesses amongst children under the age of 5, and also increase in mortality in those children. Now, I think my colleagues here have mentioned about the social impact. One is to understand the compounded impact of pollution on the socio-economic impact. You have children who are undernourished, with a weakened system or immune system. Then you have the impact of pollution on that, which compounds the effect on the health effect on those children. So they are more likely to have negative or serious outcomes from respiratory tract infections. We are seeing children who are having asthma at a much younger age. The last few years we've seen an increase in incidence in asthma as well, and respiratory problems. We tend to forget some of the other implications of pollutions in the cardiovascular side of things. We only think the air pollution affects the respiratory system, but there are stats available that show that there is an increase in cardiovascular risk or cardiovascular events in our area, which is much higher than, for example, the studies done, comparable studies done between Middelburg, the impact on Middelburg, and, for example, Tshwane and Cape Town. We find we have higher cardiovascular risks purely due to pollution.
Right. Very interesting. So it's not just the lungs that get infected, but your heart also is at risk of being weakened from these pollutants. Also, it's not just the mine workers. And as we continue with our very important conversation, we also have another member on our panel who's also very important to this discussion, as they bring a new dimension to this discussion as we try to understand about air pollution, all sorts of pollutants when it comes to mining in different areas here in South Africa. I'll allow him to introduce himself to you so you can understand exactly what it is that he does. Mr. Mahlangu, welcome to the conversation. Just please quickly talk to our audience and tell them who you are and your designation.
Thank you, ma'am. My name is Vus Mahlangu. I'm an air quality officer for the Nkangala District Municipality. That is the Highveld area. That is composed of 6 local municipalities. 3 of those are Emalahleni, Steve Chwede, and and Victor Kanye, which sits in the Highveld priority area, where we have a challenge around air pollution, because that is where we have a lot of our manufacturing industry that we term Section 21 activities. But also that is where we're having a lot of mining activities happening, therefore the associated particulate or dust pollution, so to put it.
Yeah, and this is why we're here as People's Imbizo, because from our understanding, Mr. Mahlangu, and perhaps you can help us understand this, with the Air Control Quality Act that was, I think it was put in place in 2010, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, there was 1,000 existing polluters that were given until 2015, 5 years to make sure that they comply. But apparently there's still a lot of all sorts of pollution in Highveld areas. Why has this not been implemented, and is there any will at all, be it political will, or is it from your department, to make sure that the culprits, so to speak, comply with this act?
We'll remember that these functions originally lied with the, I'll say, the function of licensing industry, particularly the emissions. It initially lied with the Department of Environmental Affairs National. And then with the passing of 2004 Air Quality Act, National and ourselves were given those years from 2004 to set up so that as from 2010, we are able to then now license industry according to a particular standards of pollution, be it dust, be it sulfur dioxide, be it NOx. So obviously you know that if a function is devolved from one level of government to another, it doesn't just happen. In our case here, yes, in 2010, when we needed to start to do the work, the municipality was not yet having capacity. Obviously, due to financial constraints, we could not be able to appoint people that we needed to appoint at the time, and therefore this function was allocated, or we had a service level agreement with the provincial administration, that is the provincial environmental department. They did the work for us until July 2013. When we were ready, we had enough capacity. We had appointed a basic level of capacity to be able to start to license, and then and therefore with the associated compliance monitoring of the condition that will have been put in these licenses. So we did that effectively. We started this function around 2013.
Okay. But you do understand the effect it has on mine workers. We're talking to Dr. Mohammed a few minutes ago, and he was telling us how this affects even children in communities. From 2010, we're in 2017 now. It's been 7 years. People are dying. Statistics say 20,000 people are dying every year from pollution that is coming from, be it your mining companies or any other companies that emit, all these toxic agents. Do you think perhaps as a department you could have done something to expedite this process to make sure that, companies comply to this act?
Yes, as I'm saying, remember, I said from 2010, the department was responsible. Obviously, they were licensing and they were doing compliance monitoring. Once you issue what we call an atmospheric emission license, it is having conditions to say, after 6 months, for instance, you need to go back there, or the industry need to actually submit a plan that will be saying, I'm emitting this much of pollutants, and this is the plan that I'm going to actually make sure that I don't exceed the limit that I'm being regulated around.
Right.
Yes. So that has been happening. It is not that it was totally nothing.
Thomas, I want to come to you, from groundwork. As we're doing our research, I went through your website and you quoted Section 24 of the Constitution that speaks of everyone's right to live in an environment that is safe and clean, everyone's right to work in an environment that is also safe and clean. Do you think perhaps there's a loophole in that constitution, because there's also a part that speaks of being able to make sure that this environment also generates some kind of wealth for the economy of the country? How do you balance the two to make sure that people are not exploited and work in these toxic environments?
In fact, I think in terms of our constitution, the only section that defines development properly is Section 24, because it talks about us defending our ecology, making sure that people are living well with their environment, but also looking into development, so it covers everything. But whilst we are talking at that, and intentionally so, I think one of our key goals as an organization is for us to see people living well. And the current situation is contrary to that, because I think our government is focused on economic development without looking into the cost of this development. So, for instance, part of the Equality Act gives the minister the power to declare an area a priority area. And part of our work is to understand whether government is fulfilling its obligations, government is fulfilling its mandate. Now, when they declared this area in 2007 a priority area, it took 4 years or almost 5 years to come up with an air quality management plan. So we only had an air quality management plan in 2012. Then, in that air quality management plan, one of the key first goals was for municipalities to have the capacity to license, monitor, and enforce. But guess what? We have the national office and the district municipality saying to industry, you can apply for postponement, meaning you can continue polluting, therefore affecting our people's health, therefore increasing the number of hospital admissions, increasing the rate of mortality, but after 5 years, you can then come back again and say, no, we've failed to comply. And we've specifically requested the licensing authority, which is the district municipality. We've requested the National Air Quality Officer to say, you cannot do this. It's against the law.
Well, it's a good thing we have Mr. Mahlangu. I have to keep coming back to you, and I'm sure perhaps you can help us with this 5-year postponement of companies that have been identified to be the culprits when it comes to pollution. Can you explain to us why it was found necessary to give them this 5-year postponement for them to comply to this act?
Thank you, Audrey. I'm going to start it here. When we came into the Air Quality Act, we had the APA, Air Pollution Control Act, that used to be a legislation used for this particular function in the previous regime. Now, when we came through, it was evident that the previous legislation was not holding industry to, we didn't have real minimum emissions during that time. We didn't have real minimum standards. Now, when we came through, this particular act, the Air Quality Act, had a transitional measures. One of those transitional measures was that they knew when they were compiling the legislation, they knew that certain industry will not be able to meet the minimum standards at a go. They'll have to do major structural changes in order to abate the emissions going on the air. Now, they purposely or non-purposely, national government actually had a provision inside the Air Quality Act that says where it is impossible, where it is going to collapse business, business can gradually request postponement not more than 5 years, just to make sure that business is able to cope up and actually be able to buy technology that they will be able to reach the minimum emissions.
Okay.
So now, that is the and that was not a decision of the district municipality or national for that matter. It was something that was enacted in the act, and then and therefore that is why we find ourselves. We also are not necessarily in favor of that kind of a situation, but unfortunately it's something that is legislated, that the National Equality Officer will have to take a decision on in concurrence with the authorities. In this case, the authority will be the district municipality.
Yes, and I can appreciate that, Mr. Mahlangu, that as a licensing officer, you also have to comply to decisions that have been made, you know, above you. But, you know, the 5 years that is given for these companies to comply to, at the same time, people are dying. And we'll come back to you, Dr. Mohammed, and you can talk to us about the long-term effects of, you know, all these pollutants when they affect a human being. We'll come back to that. I just want us to come to the audience, and perhaps if anyone has any contribution of how pollution has affected your environment, or someone that you know, or yourself, and how this has affected you. Anyone would like to contribute? You can proceed, sir.
Okay, my name is Tsepo Masha. I stay here around in Meropek. So, sebe kinyako tseba ko gore le dira jwang ka di mining because it's not only air pollution e re fang bothata. This water contamination, because we have to we have to buy water nowadays. We no longer get water straight from the tap, because even these minings, they are here in Mpumalanga. So we are having a problem with water. Yet you guys are digging coal here in the Mpumalanga area. So we are confused why these things are happening in Mpumalanga.
Okay.
Because we are not getting even access to electricity sometimes. But still, you're getting cold in Mpumalanga.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your contribution. So we'll come back to the panel and see if we can get a response from that. Anton, if you will allow me to come back to you. You know, normally it's the poorest, you know, of the communities, you know, and some miners that are dumped in these areas that are prone to, you know, air pollution and water pollution, that bear the brunt of the environmental pollution, and yet there is no contribution with regards to developing these communities. What does the mining charter say about this? Has it addressed this problem?
You see, thank you. You see, all the time when a DMR that he provide the license for mining, the question is come with what come with the hand with the miners when they come the community, just to promise the people they're gonna get some jobs. So you remember in South Africa now the number of unemployment is too high. So everyone when he comes in front he's saying, I will provide you job. The people forget about these things happening all the times. We get so many mines around Malahleni especially and Steve Tshwete. But those two areas when we see, there are so many people unemployed. So I don't know what's the mentality that is coming about it, and they forget about the life of the people who are living around. Because we can't just think about the economy, resources in a high process of economy. What about the lives of those people are living in that area?
Yeah,
what
because the fact of the matter is, you know, when it comes to coal, you know, power supply in the country, it is the cheapest and quickest way to produce power. So, you know, this is where the government or whoever is trying to produce power will go to.
That's why they say the product is cheap, because they don't include the cost that the people pay for their medical bill. They don't include the cost of buying water instead of getting clean, drinkable water. No, it doesn't include the cost of destroying the environment. So all those external costs are being carried by ordinary people.
Right.
And still, when it comes to, for instance, the pricing of electricity, we still subsidize most of the industries because they've got fixed agreements, we pay more. So now, tell me if if all the cost to the health, the cost to water contamination, the cost to the environmental destruction was carried by industries, will we say our electricity is cheap today? I doubt. That's why we're even saying to government, if somebody wants to run a power plant, if ESCOM wants to continue producing electricity using coal, let them carry the external cost. In Middelburg, we've got 3 coal-fired power plants. What are the people getting? How much are they paying for electricity? How much are they paying on a daily basis for their medical cost? How much is the public health sector system spending
Exactly,
in terms
because
of health?
when you have your
So
employees
all
getting
those-
sick, the government is paying for that health.
But where
for
does the
that
money
health
come
crisis.
from?
Some of them are even complaining that they actually don't have power in their communities. I want to come back to Dr. Mohammed. You know, the country suffers when you have employees that are not able to come to work because they're not feeling well, because of these air and water pollution. We also have issues of people literally dying, and this affects the economy. But of course, human life is more important than that. You spoke of a very sensitive issue of children also suffering, you know, from the pollution in these environments. There's issues of mercury. Perhaps you could talk to us about the long-term effects, you know, when it comes to pollution and when it comes intact with the human being. Can you take us through that?
For sure, I think what you've been listening to is valid arguments, and one has to take this in a holistic approach. So there is definitely an impact on adult people, especially people working in the mines, your coal workers, lung or the black lung disease that they call. So most people just focus on the respiratory impact of mine workers, but I think it extends much further than that. If you look at it in its entirety, where we discussed earlier on about the impact on children, the increase in mortality for children under 5 years of age, which can be related directly to air pollutants. There's a number of studies done. The one was done by a European organization a few years ago that measured chromium and barium levels, and they could not find accurate levels of barium and chromium in our air because the instruments could not measure such high levels. So even the instruments could not measure such high levels. That's the one issue. The other issue is South Africa has much more lenient compliance levels in terms of pollutants in the air compared to World Health Organization. Even those levels are not complied with. And the impact of all this, like we mentioned, children with respiratory disease, adults with cardiac disease, the issue of mercury that you mentioned. Mercury leaches out of the ash pans of Eskom ash dams, gets into the water resources and then climbs up the food chain through the vegetation and the animals that eat that. And those things cause neurocognitive diseases in children. So you have a community which you've been listening to with major socio-economic challenges to start with, and now you compound this with pollutants in the air, pollutants in the water like mercury, which is causing neurological problems in children, which has, like you want to know about long-term impact.
Yes.
Cognitive developmental issues in children. There's research and studies done which actually go as far as determine the number of IQ points that are lost by children in these polluted areas because of the mercury
Tell me
poisoning.
something, doctor. Can a pregnant woman's fetus be affected by pollutants?
Definitely. Anything that affects a person
Mother will affect
the
the
baby,
unborn child.
ultimately. So there's a number of different challenges. Now when you take all these challenges, I don't want to get into the political side of things, but if there's challenges now with the education system, so you take a child from this area, in the HP area or the Highveld priority area, besides socio-economic impact, you got pollution impact, you got neurocognitive challenges, you got schooling. So these are the children that are being disadvantaged the most for people living in affluent areas in Tshwane and Cape Town to benefit from. We have another interesting statistic where children are more affected by outdoor pollutants than they are affected by the indoor pollutants during winter when they have coal burning in their homes or during the year. They are safer in their house with coal burning fireplace in their house than they are outdoors. Children are more infected because they are younger and they have developing lungs.
Yeah.
They're playing outside more. So the impact on society in the long term is that we are affecting our tomorrow's generation today.
Thomas, let's come to you.
If you ask industry, how much carbon are you emitting? You know, they can't tell you. And if you say to them, I want you to report on your carbon emissions per facility, they don't want to do that. But take that away. Let's look at the most important pollutant that people are being exposed to on a daily basis. Your PM 2.5. It's small, it's tiny, less than the hair size. It penetrates the lungs, it flows with your blood system. Can we get industry to comply with the minimum emission standards when it comes to that? No, we are failing.
And that's
Now,
a very
if you
interesting
ask- if you
point you
ask-
say, Thomas, because I think the mining industry in this country is a very powerful one, you know, and it makes you wonder when it comes to legislation and really taking responsibility around responsible mining and make sure that you, when it comes to ecosystem, you take care of that. It's very difficult to actually find information to see how much of this carbon dioxide and responsibility is taken. It's really very difficult to work around that.
I mean, for just an obvious question, how many industries, just within the jurisdiction of Nkangala, have been taken to court for non-compliance? How many directors have been imprisoned for non-compliance? None. But we're having a government institution saying we do monitoring, we do enforcement, but we always see the reports. Industries are in non-compliance. Now, we have municipalities. I mean, I'm not guessing. I'm saying we have municipalities without an air quality officer. We are seated in Steve Twitter, we don't have an air quality officer. We don't have an environmental management inspector. You go to Victor Kanye, it's the same. You go to Wheatbank, there's an air quality officer. How many people are there as environmental management inspectors designated to do the work? I think about 3. Then how many industries do they have in that area that they have to deal with? So we're seated with a system which is being intentionally discredited by government officials because they don't care about what people suffer, but they care about protecting the profits. They care about protecting Sasol. They care about protecting Eskom in the disguise of jobs. Now, when we say Eskom must decommission some of their plant, then they say 30,000 people will lose their jobs. How many people have ever argued that we were busy putting in solar geysers? How many people lost jobs when the subsidized program of putting solar geysers was stopped? Nobody said this X number of people lost jobs. But when we talk about Eskom, all of a sudden, the mining community, the trucking owners, they come in the open, even government, to say, we are going to lose jobs. There were people who were doing right in Imbizo. They were responsible. They got jobs. They were installing the solars. You know, there were people who were manufacturing these solars. Those people lost jobs. Nobody said a word.
And now it's time for a very short break. You're watching People's Imbizo, brought to you by ANN7. We're talking about air and water pollution in mining environments and how that can be curbed. After the break, we'll talk about renewable energy and how this could perhaps assist in this scourge. We'll be back. Do stay with us.